I'm 27, and a year ago I started my own business with a couple of friends from college. Things are going great for us financially, and we've already turned a profit. A few days ago, my parents, both 54, with whom I haven't spoken since graduating college, suddenly reached out and offered to become partners in my business, saying they wanted to invest in it. I refused. I didn't even discuss it with my friends because everyone knew I had a bad relationship with my parents, and under no circumstances did I want to involve them in our business. My parents always neglected and mocked me in childhood, which, to put it mildly, was strange since I was the kind of kid parents are usually proud of. Both of them are quite wealthy people. My father is a dental surgeon, and my mother is a financial director of a company. I grew up in a family of overachievers, and naturally, from early childhood, I was very ambitious. But for some reason, my parents never supported me and constantly ridiculed me for being a nerd. They had plenty of money, but they barely met even my basic needs. I had no idea why they hated me so much until I realized they indirectly blamed me for not achieving the success they dreamed of. They were quite successful, but they didn't become famous as they wanted. I learned about this at 16 when I complained to my aunt, my father's younger sister now, 46, the only person who understood me. It was she who told me the truth about my parents' baseless hatred, considering I was old enough to know. My parents blame me for the fact that they had to spend time and money raising me, and believe that if they had invested those resources in their careers, they would have achieved much more. They had a child under pressure from relatives and didn't want kids at all. But since I was born, they had to deal with me somehow, and they chose mockery and constant humiliation. In childhood, I was deprived of a lot, even though they paid for everything. There was no real help from my parents. They didn't help with small things like homework or projects, nor with more serious issues like school conflicts. When I asked for something that wasn't strictly necessary, they brushed me off, or worse, mocked me. They ridiculed my appearance, which was easy because I was skinny and looked like a typical nerd. They laughed at my passion for computers and said that the most I'd become was an IT guy that was my ceiling. So, investing money in me was a waste. They emotionally ignored me. I got used to such insults from childhood. Back then, I didn't see anything strange in it and thought it was my fault. That's why my parents didn't love me the way they should. It was pretty awful, but for me, it was the norm. In my teenage years, I started to protest a bit against their harsh treatment, but my father quickly shut it down, threatening to kick me out onto the street if I didn't calm down. So instead of open protest, I started venting to my aunt, who asked me 1,000 times if I wanted her to report our family situation to child services. But I always said no, because I was afraid of the consequences. My aunt couldn't adopt me, and I didn't want to be a burden, so I chose to suffer in my parents' house. When things got really bad, I talked to my aunt, and it made me feel better. When I finally learned the reason for my parents' behavior, I decided I would disappear from their lives right after graduating college. Since they didn't care about me, they sent me to a public school. Sorry if this sounds arrogant, but I believe it was a waste of my potential. In any case, it was a clear signal that they didn't care about my education or me in general. However, I still had some expectations of them, which completely collapsed when they announced that after graduating high school when I turned 18, there would be no place for me in their house until I achieved some success on my own. Moreover, they refused to pay for my college education. I completely lost it and told them they couldn't do this to me because I knew I had a bright future ahead. I was an excellent student my whole life, and if they kicked me out right before college, my future would be at risk. But they stood their ground and said, "You have no future. Stop overestimating yourself." Then they added that I shouldn't hope for a bright future because teachers and friends mistakenly convinced me I was a genius when the most I'd achieve was a low-level IT job fixing computers for idiots in offices. Honestly, that was complete nonsense because even those supposedly worthless IT guys have deep knowledge, and deserve respect. But my stupid, disgusting parents would never understand that. I tried to convince them to at least pay for my education. Housing could be figured out later, but they were adamant. So a few weeks before my 18th birthday, I ran away from home and went to my aunt. I applied for scholarships to many colleges, and my aunt kept trying to persuade my parents to help me, but to no avail. In the end, we decided I'd go to the college that offered me the maximum tuition discount. Fortunately, I was accepted into a college with a scholarship covering 80% of the tuition and a good computer science program. That suited me, and my aunt agreed to pay the remaining amount. She worked in sales and didn't earn as much as my parents, but she still agreed to help. Plus, thanks to the scholarship, the tuition was relatively affordable. I lived in a dorm, visited my aunt when she was home. She often went on business trips, and that's how I spent my college years. My life significantly improved when I left my parents' house. The constant anxiety and worries disappeared, and I became happier and found it easier to make friends. That's how I met my current friends and business partners, with whom we eventually started our own IT company. Now things are relatively successful for us. I thought my parents wouldn't care what I was doing, as they hadn't since my school days. However, when they found out I was graduating college as the top student, they decided to show up at the graduation ceremony. Of course, they couldn't get inside since I didn't buy them tickets, or invite them as we weren't in contact. We met after the ceremony, and I was shocked to see them standing next to my aunt, who looked as annoyed as I was. I had plans to go drink with friends, but instead I spent the next 2 hours in my parents' hotel room, arguing and yelling with them. They were furious that I didn't invite them to the graduation, but invited my aunt and demanded explanations. It was funny considering they kicked me out at 18 and refused to pay for my education, despite having the means. Plus, given all the cruel treatment in childhood and the emotional issues that still affect my adult life, I believe they didn't deserve any explanations. But I didn't want them to cause a scene in front of everyone, so I escorted them to their hotel. There, I couldn't hold back anymore and told them everything I thought about them. I said I never wanted to see them again, and if they tried to contact me again, I'd get a restraining order or something like that. Then I left the hotel and went to meet my friends. I wasn't going to let my parents ruin my happy day. After that, we didn't communicate anymore. Later, I learned from my aunt that my parents were disappointed and angry, and even discussed cutting me out of their inheritance. That didn't change anything, as I never expected to get anything from them. That's where it all ended. Almost 7 years passed, and we didn't communicate. A couple of days ago, they suddenly called. My parents asked my aunt for my number, telling her they wanted to apologize. She gave them my number. My aunt was going to warn me, but forgot. I understand she's been busy lately, so it's no big deal. I don't hold it against her. But I didn't hear any apologies. My parents immediately jumped to a business proposal because now investing in me had become profitable. Naturally, I refused, hung up, and blocked them. Then I told my friends about it. They didn't mind that I refused my parents without consulting them, as they knew the whole history of my relationship with them. I didn't know what to expect next, but the very next day, my parents struck back. They tagged me and all my friends in a snarky post on Facebook, claiming that I wasn't the independent computer genius I presented myself as, but just a guy who achieved moderate success in business thanks to Dad's money. Now I supposedly refuse to acknowledge the help they allegedly provided me all these years. I was in complete shock from that post and almost called to tell them off in their face. But before doing that, I decided to respond with something I'd kept for many years. I had a few old videos recorded in my teenage years when I lived with them, documenting daily life, in case I ever needed to prove in court what terrible parents they were. I never published them because I didn't want to have anything to do with them, and was sure that if I posted videos of them being rude, mocking, and treating me like garbage, it would definitely lead to consequences. Back then, I just didn't want extra drama, so I did nothing. However, their Facebook post changed everything, and I finally posted that video. And here's the moment when I might have acted like a jerk. I wrote a long post on Instagram explaining the entire history of my relationship with my parents and published those videos exposing them. After that, I called my lawyer and explained the whole situation to her, but she was ahead of me and had already started preparing documents to file a defamation lawsuit against my parents for their actions. She was also going to contact my partners to see if they agreed with the lawsuit, since their names were mentioned in the Facebook post, too. Under my parents' post, there were already comments from several relatives and friends of my parents writing that it was great that I had finally been exposed and that they would never do business with our company. So there were definitely grounds for a lawsuit. I sent screenshots to the lawyer and told my partners everything to keep them in the loop. When all this was done, I waited for my parents to call, begging for forgiveness, and they did call, demanding apologies and saying that I messed up by publishing those videos. Their argument was that they posted their accusations on personal accounts on Facebook, so only a limited number of people saw them. I, however, made a post on a public profile where many more people would see it, given the number of my followers. They demanded that I immediately delete the post because people had already started sending them insulting messages and even threats. All this could put an end to their careers since they looked awful in the videos, and if their employers saw them, it would be over for them. I got a bit carried away and replied that they got what they deserved, after which I hung up. Nevertheless, I archived my post and turned off my phone for a while. When I picked up the phone a couple of hours later, I saw an email from my parents. In it, they apologized for everything that happened in the past, but emphasized that my revenge was terrible. Moreover, I posted personal videos with their participation without their consent, which, according to them, gave them grounds to sue me too. Obviously, they had already been served with the defamation lawsuit, so they said I had to withdraw it. Otherwise, they would unhesitatingly start talking about my unethical actions, which would clearly negatively affect my business. I discussed this with my partners, and they believe we have no reason to back down, since I did the right thing, unlike my parents who lied and deliberately distorted facts to portray me as a liar and undermine trust. Their point of view seems reasonable, but for some reason I still feel guilty continuing the case since my parents apologized in the letter. I understand that this lawsuit will bring negativity to all sides, one way or another. I don't know what to do next. Tell me, am I doing the wrong thing by suing my parents for defamation, even after they apologized? Well, I suggest right now to write in the comments an answer to the author's question. In my opinion, the key point here is whether they are apologizing sincerely or not. And if they are, then most likely it's worth withdrawing the lawsuit. But if not, then it turns out there's no reason to. But how to know if they're apologizing sincerely or not? That's already a big question. Let's find out what happened next. Hello, everyone. So I decided to continue the lawsuit for several reasons. First, this decision was made not only by me, but also by my friends' partners. Although their posts didn't get as much publicity as mine, I'm sure it was still seen by many people, and it could seriously harm our business. Besides, my parents' goal was clearly to tarnish my reputation and the reputation of my company, to satisfy their ego by ruining the work of my life. So the defamation accusations are quite justified. Second, their apologies are worth absolutely nothing, since they were only expressed when their own careers were at risk. They weren't sincere, they apologized solely for their own benefit. My whole life, I didn't go against my parents because I was afraid of them. Even now, almost 30, I'm still scared to go against them. This fear is like a part of me. It's so deeply rooted in me that I didn't even realize it until you in the comments pointed out how many times I had the opportunity to tell people the truth about my parents, and how many times I deliberately stayed silent out of fear of consequences. But now I understand that I'm not in danger. Now all the power is in my hands and they can no longer harm me. I will sue them despite their fake apologies. Let's see how this ends. One thing I'm sure of, I'll make them pay. I'm tired of being the good guy, especially with those who don't deserve it at all. My parents treated me openly cruelly, and no child deserves such a childhood. And since I have the opportunity to take revenge on them, I will do it. Until this moment, I stayed above all this, but I see no reason to continue doing so when they attack me again and again just to draw attention to themselves. It's just disgusting, and I'm not going to tolerate it anymore. Today, my aunt contacted me to find out what I decided about the situation with my parents. I told her that we are continuing the lawsuit. She was pleased with my decision and said she was proud of me. She also apologized for not doing enough for me in childhood, although honestly, I don't blame her for anything. Back then, she was just starting her own life and career, so she simply couldn't afford to fully take care of me. But when it was needed, she stepped in and helped, and I will always be grateful to her for that. My grandparents and other relatives practically worship my parents, so no one would have believed me if I had told them how things really were, and how my parents treated me. Even if my aunt had gone to child services, I could have ended up in a foster family or an even worse situation. I'm not saying she's perfect, but I feel the need to defend her now, when many are quick to criticize the only person who ever stood up for me and supported me with all her strength. That's all. I haven't communicated with my parents since their last letter, and most likely they're still waiting for me to withdraw the lawsuit. It's been 4 days already, and we decided to first try to negotiate through a court-appointed mediator. If necessary, we'll go to court, but for now, we're set on an out-of-court settlement. My parents have money, and quite a lot of it, so I have nothing to reproach myself for. They messed up, so they have to pay. I don't know what's happening with their jobs now, because there was real hysteria on their side after I published those videos. They accuse me of putting their careers at risk. It's hard for me to believe how much manipulation and drama was in their calls and letters. Fortunately, I didn't fall for it. Otherwise, it would have been very sad. They tried to portray my actions as just as bad as theirs, or even worse. They spread false rumors about me, and I only responded by revealing the truth to everyone. Honestly, I have a huge desire to unarchive the video after the negotiations are over, because my parents truly deserve to be exposed and the whole world should see their true face. Today, the court appointed a mediator for our negotiations and notified us about it. My parents called me. I temporarily unblocked their number for this conversation to ask when exactly I would withdraw the lawsuit since the situation was already getting out of control. I told them it wasn't going to happen, and they completely lost it. They started hysterics. I could barely understand what they were trying to say. One thing was clear, they were furious. There was a lot of incoherent screaming, and in the end I just hung up. However, they called back immediately. This time my father said that I had really pissed him off, and such tricks didn't scare him at all. I fought back and finally told them everything I thought. It was harsh, but extremely necessary. And after that conversation, I felt immense relief. After everything said, I just hung up, not giving them a chance to continue the argument. But they didn't back down, and after that, my parents called my aunt and started telling her that I was suing them completely without grounds, which is absolutely untrue, and tried to manipulate her feelings to make her pity them and convince me to stop the process. However, my aunt isn't so easily broken, and besides, my parents too often use the argument, but we're family for it to still work. So she responded exactly as I asked her to. She said she could express sympathy for them, but nothing more. And if they kept calling her, they'd lose even that sympathy, and she'd report them to the police for constant harassment. That was cool of her. After that, I didn't hear from my parents for a few hours until the evening. It turned out that when they couldn't sway my aunt to their side, they contacted literally all the relatives telling them that I was suing them without any reason. As a result, all the relatives started sending me the same message. It was a pretty clumsily executed idea because it became obvious that my parents sent everyone the same template text. Instead of at least slightly changing it, most just forwarded it verbatim. It became clear that my parents had orchestrated it, hoping to force me to change my decision. Honestly, it's even sad how desperately they're trying to fix the situation, realizing it's already hopeless. The lawsuit has officially started. Right now, we're on a break. I just had lunch and am writing this post sitting in the lobby. My parents were just spitting venom, but it's obvious they're losing. If they want to avoid a full trial, they'll have to agree to our terms. When we went on the lunch break, my father was glaring at me, and my mother was trying to comfort him, playing the helpless woman, but no one bought it because we all understood it was just a performance. My friends and business partners are incredibly supportive and are by my side at every step of this process, for which I'm very grateful. Even now, one of my friends said that if I want to talk after all this, he's always there because he perfectly understands how emotionally hard this is for me. I'm sincerely grateful that despite my awful parents, I have wonderful friends and a loving aunt. I greatly appreciate everything I have. Well, that's all. I'm waiting for your opinions on the situation in the comments. What do you think? Did the author do the right thing by taking it to court? Or should he not have done it? Because despite everything, they are still his parents. Or maybe it was enough to take it to court, but then stop and not continue the lawsuit. I'm waiting for your opinions in general in the comments. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Watch our previous video, which you'll see right here, and good luck to you.